Just moments ago, in a dramatic and emotionally charged courtroom scene, Janice Combs, music mogul Sean "Diddy" Combs' own mother, took the witness stand against her son. Known for decades as his fiercest defender, her unexpected testimony marked a stunning shift in a high-profile trial already filled with twists. With the nation watching, Janice's words delivered a powerful blow, not just to the defense, but to the image of a man once thought untouchable. Her voice was calm, but the weight of her words broke through years of silence, cutting straight through the courtroom's tension. "I love my son," she said, "but I cannot lie for him." Witnesses reported Diddy visibly shaken, pale, and speechless. A rare glimpse of vulnerability from a man long shielded by fame and fortune. In that moment, the trial changed course. The mother who once protected him had now become the voice of painful, necessary truth. A mother's testimony, unseen and unheard. Until now, Janice Combs was not just any witness in the high-profile trial that had captured the nation's attention. She was the woman who had stood quietly behind Sean Combs for decades. Through the dizzying heights of his career, the glitz and glamour of a music and business empire he built, and the dark shadows of controversies that seemed to trail his every step. A mother, a confidant, and a guardian of his secrets, Janice had always been the unwavering pillar in his personal life. She had been his most vocal defender, shielding him from the storms of public scrutiny and media frenzy alike. But on this day, everything changed. When Janice Combs walked slowly toward the witness stand, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted palpably. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation and disbelief. Reporters halted their furious note-taking, cameras adjusted their lenses, and even the jury leaned forward in silent curiosity. The judge, known for his stoicism, momentarily dropped his impassive mask, his eyes widening ever so slightly. No one had anticipated her presence. Not the prosecution, not the defense, not the public. She appeared without prior notice, and with her, a new gravity settled over the room. The changing face of power. Diddy's reaction. Sean Combs had entered the trial exuding confidence. His posture was impeccable, his smile effortless, as if he were still the unshakable king of his kingdom. In the gallery, his supporters cheered quietly, and whispers passed between his legal team, who seemed certain that their fortress of influence would withstand any storm. Throughout the proceedings, Sean had maintained a calm that bordered on arrogance, projecting an image of a man who controlled every narrative and every outcome. But when Janice Combs was called to the stand, cracks began to show in that carefully constructed armor. Perhaps it was the surreal sight of his own mother, once his fiercest defender, now summoned by the prosecution to recount truths that could dismantle his legacy. Perhaps it was the dawning realization that the woman who had known him longer and better than anyone else was ready to reveal hidden realities, even those he had kept from his closest allies. Whatever the cause, the change was unmistakable. Sean's face paled, a subtle but unmistakable draining of color. The confident, steady hands that had been rifling through documents froze mid-motion. The poised, unbreakable public persona gave way to something more vulnerable, a son confronted by a painful reckoning. The courtroom sensed it too. The veneer was cracking. The courtroom holds its breath. Janice took her seat with a calm measuredness that belied the storm beneath. Her eyes avoided contact, especially with her son, whose gaze was locked on her with a complex mixture of disbelief, hurt, and an unspoken sense of betrayal. The courtroom fell into a hush so profound it felt almost sacred. The murmurs in the gallery faded into silence, as though the gravity of this moment demanded reverence. The prosecutor approached, voice steady, but tinged with empathy. "Mrs. Combs, thank you for coming today. I know this must be incredibly difficult." Janice nodded, small and almost imperceptible. The judge acknowledged her with a solemn nod and granted her the floor. From that point forward, the tone of the trial shifted dramatically. This was no longer a battlefield of anonymous accusations, leaked rumors, or second-hand allegations. It became an intimate, raw examination of a mother's perspective, one who had nurtured, loved, and believed in her son, but could no longer turn a blind eye to the truth. Legal battles and family ties, objections and rulings. Almost immediately, Sean Combs's lead attorney rose in objection. The defense invoked family privilege, a legal argument that confidential communications between family members, particularly between a mother and son, should be protected from disclosure. They claimed such testimony would unfairly prejudice the jury by exploiting private conversations meant to remain within the family. The prosecution responded with equal vigor, countering that no such privilege applies when those conversations involve alleged criminal conduct. The law must not allow the shield of family loyalty to become a sanctuary for wrongdoing. After a tense sidebar discussion behind closed doors, the judge made a landmark ruling. He overruled the defense's objections and affirmed the court's right to hear Mrs. Combs's testimony. His decision sent a clear message. No shield of family loyalty can protect illegal acts from public scrutiny. A mother's painful truth. With the courtroom still as silent as a tomb, Janice adjusted her glasses and met the prosecutor's gaze. Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of years of emotional struggle. "I have been asked to testify about conversations I had with my son over many years. Conversations about behaviors I saw, patterns I grew increasingly concerned about," she began. "I am here because the truth needs to be told, no matter how painful." Her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The woman who had once cheered Sean's triumphs now stood as a witness to a darker reality, a reality she had tried to confront but had been silenced by love and loyalty for too long. She recounted moments when she had noticed changes, an aggression here, a secretive phone call there, unexplained absences, and defensive reactions. She spoke of confrontations in private, pleas to seek help, and her own heartbreak at the growing distance between the son she loved and the man he was becoming. Janice revealed that she had wrestled with these concerns for years, torn between protecting her son and upholding the values she held dear. "I did not want to believe it," she confessed, voice cracking, but denial does not change facts. Childhood and sacrifice, the foundation of a complex relationship. Janice Combs took a deep breath, steadying herself before sharing a story that few had ever heard. A story that laid bare the foundation of a bond marked by love, sacrifice, and unspoken burdens. The courtroom, still thick with tension from the earlier testimony, grew even quieter, as if the very walls were leaning in to listen. "I raised Sean as a single mother," Janice began, her voice softening with the weight of memory. "His father was tragically murdered when Sean was just a child. That loss changed everything." She paused, blinking away the moisture gathering in her eyes. "I worked multiple jobs, sometimes 3 at a time, just to provide for him, to give him opportunities I never had. I wanted him to be strong, to succeed, to be better than the life we had." Her words painted a portrait of resilience. She spoke of sleepless nights, sacrifices unseen by the public eye, and a fierce determination to shield her son from a world that had been cruel to her. "I did everything I could to give Sean a chance at something more. I wanted to see him rise, to watch him build a life filled with possibilities. And rise he did. Janice's face brightened with a faint, bittersweet smile as she recalled Sean's early days. He started as an intern at Uptown Records, just a young man with a dream. But even then, you could see it. His charisma, his determination. Sean was always a leader. She looked toward the jury, as if sharing a secret. Even as a boy, he could convince anyone of anything. That was his gift. The darkening path. When success breeds isolation. Janice's tone shifted, growing quieter yet heavier, as if the very act of telling was reopening old wounds. Somewhere along the way, things changed, she said, her gaze drifting toward the jury with a seriousness that commanded attention. Success came so fast, so completely. Suddenly, everyone was saying yes to him. Everyone wanted a piece of him. She swallowed hard, and he began to believe he was above the rules that apply to ordinary people. The courtroom absorbed her words, the implication clear. Power had altered her son, and with it, their relationship. She described the slow closing of doors, once open and welcoming, that had once defined their family life. His temper grew volatile when challenged, she said. Staff and associates seemed afraid. Boundaries that had once been respected were ignored, even dismissed. At first, I told myself it was the pressure, Janice explained, her voice tinged with a mother's hope against hope. The music industry is brutal, and he had so much on his shoulders. But denial could only last so long. Then came the rumors, whispers she tried to dismiss, but couldn't ignore. The Miami incident, a mother's worst fears. Janice's testimony took on a more urgent tone as she recounted a pivotal moment, an incident that crystallized her deepest fears. In 2008, I showed up unannounced at his Miami home, she said, a small chuckle escaping her lips, eliciting nervous smiles from the courtroom. Mothers can do that. What she found that day was unsettling. A crew was cleaning up after a wild party, but the cleanup was different. Phones were being collected, and one young woman was escorted out in tears by security. The atmosphere was charged, and the tension was palpable. When Sean saw me, he was furious I hadn't called, she said, voice firm but strained. But what I saw that day stayed with me. Janice didn't elaborate further, but the courtroom understood the gravity. The scene painted a vivid picture of chaos and fear behind the glitz and glamour. Confronting the truth. A mother's desperate questions. Janice's voice hardened as she spoke of the conversations she desperately tried to have with Sean. I asked questions because mothers do that, she said. But he would brush me off. He told me I didn't understand how his world worked, that everything was consensual, that this was just the lifestyle of the industry. Her frustration was palpable, the gap between motherly concern and the protective walls Sean built around himself growing ever wider. When the allegations first became public around 2017, Janice didn't hesitate. I called him immediately, she said, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. Any mother would. She described the call, the moment she asked him directly, "Is it true?" His answer was swift and defensive. They're lies. They want money. This is something all successful men face. Janice paused, gathering strength. I wanted to believe him. I did. Her voice cracked slightly, revealing the emotional toll of that hope and denial. A mother's dilemma. Janice Combs' testimony revealed the painful paradox many parents face when confronted with allegations against their children. Love and loyalty pulling in one direction, and the need for truth and justice pulling in another. Her story was not just about a famous man accused of wrongdoing. It was about a mother's sacrifice, her heartbreak, and her courage in speaking out despite the cost. As she concluded, The courtroom remained silent, the weight of her words lingering long after she stepped down. In that moment, Janice Combs became more than a witness. She became a symbol of the complex human stories hidden behind headlines, the families fractured by fame, the sacrifices made in silence, and the painful search for redemption and truth. A crack in the facade. The turning point in 2023. The courtroom's tension reached a new peak as Janice Combs recounted a moment that changed everything, the moment when her unwavering trust in her son began to unravel irreparably. But in late 2023, after Cassie filed her lawsuit, Janice said, her voice steady but heavy with emotion, "We were alone in his New York apartment. I told him I needed the truth, not the lawyer's lines, not the carefully crafted public statements, just the truth between mother and son." Her eyes briefly closed, gathering strength before continuing. He was different that day. Tired, maybe. The facade cracked a little. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. He didn't admit everything, but he said something I'll never forget. She paused, breathing shakily as the weight of those words settled over the courtroom. "Mom," he said, "you don't build what I've built by playing by everyone else's rules. Sometimes people get hurt. That's business." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For the first time, Janice's voice broke, the raw pain behind the mother's mask laid bare. "That's not how I raised him," she said, her voice trembling with sorrow and disbelief. "That's not business. That's not right." The emotional weight, a son's betrayal, and a mother's grief. Throughout the testimony, Sean Combs sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the table, his face unreadable. The confident man who once seemed unbreakable now appeared lost in an internal storm. His attorneys scribbled notes frantically, trying to hold the line, but their usual composure seemed fractured. Janice's recounting of the events felt like a slow unraveling of a lifelong narrative she had once treasured. She described the growing alarm she felt in early 2024, when surveillance footage was leaked showing Sean assaulting Cassie in a hotel hallway. A brutal, undeniable confirmation of her worst fears. That footage, she said, changed everything. The weight of evidence, documenting a dark reality. Unable to ignore the mounting signs and driven by a mother's instinct to seek clarity, Janice began meticulously documenting what she saw and heard over the years. Conversations, troubling behaviors, incidents she witnessed or heard about. She wrote them all down, trying to piece together a pattern she could no longer deny. This wasn't about bias or blind love anymore, she explained to the court. It was about the truth. In court, she held up the collection of notes, marked as Government Exhibit 42, a decade's worth of documentation spanning from 2008 through 2024. The records revealed a timeline of escalating recklessness, manipulation, and a blatant disregard for others, especially women. This was my way of making sense of a reality that was too painful to ignore, Janice said. I wanted to separate the facts from the feelings, and the facts were clear. The prosecution presented the notes with solemn gravity, each entry underscoring a growing darkness shadowing Sean's rise to power. A silent exchange, the unspoken pain between mother and son. Amidst the heavy testimony, the courtroom witnessed a moment that transcended words. Sean Combs finally looked up from the table and met his mother's gaze. The first time since she had taken the stand. The air was charged, thick with decades of love, pain, disappointment, and the fragile hope for reconciliation. In that single glance, a lifetime of unspoken emotions passed between them. A complex bond forged by blood, strained by betrayal, yet still yearning for understanding. Janice's voice, calm and resolute, cut through the silence. "I love my son. That will never change," she declared with unwavering conviction. "But I cannot pretend anymore. I cannot be silent anymore. Too many people have been hurt." The crucial conversation. A mother seeks truth behind bars. One of the most poignant moments came when Janice recounted a private meeting with Sean in April 2024, shortly after his arrest, but before the trial had begun. Arranged in a quiet, secured room at the detention center, the meeting was one of the rare moments they could speak alone, away from the relentless glare of public scrutiny. Janice described the encounter with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "I told him I needed to hear the truth, all of it, before I could continue supporting him publicly. I said, 'Sean, I'm your mother. I love you unconditionally, but I need to know what I'm standing behind.'" The silence that followed was thick and heavy, as if the weight of her words hung between them like a fragile thread. Finally, Sean spoke, his voice low but candid. "The truth," he said, "is I created a world where I made the rules, where what I wanted happened, where people either played along or got pushed aside." Janice listened, pained but resolute. "Was it always right?" he asked rhetorically. "Number? Did people get hurt? Yes, but that's how power works. Ma, that's how it's always worked." A mother's stand for truth. In the final moments of her testimony, Janice Combs stood not only as a mother grappling with unimaginable heartbreak, but as a powerful voice of moral clarity. Her love for Sean remained unwavering, but her silence no longer could. By bringing forward years of personal documentation and recounting deeply private conversations, she pierced the veil of power and denial that had long shielded her son. Her words echoed far beyond the courtroom, reminding the public that accountability must not be sacrificed in the name of loyalty. In a case that exposed the dark undercurrents of fame, influence, and unchecked power, Janice's testimony became a defining moment, a raw human reckoning that reframed the narrative. As she stepped down, the courtroom felt the weight of both justice and sorrow. Janice Combs had done what many could not. She chose truth over comfort, integrity over protection. In doing so, she redefined what it truly means to love and to stand for what's right.